Hi, Alberto. Hi, Marco.
Hi.
Hi.
Today we are talking about the second edition of the Optimizing DAX video course. This was one of your best sellers. Why did you create a new edition?
A good question.
That's a good question, yeah. Well, the first edition is from a few years ago, and a lot of things changed since then. New technologies, new development, the engine changed. We changed as teachers, we learn a lot more. But I think the most important thing is that technologies that were not all that useful, think about direct query, for example, at the time, it was there. Direct query was there from the beginning, but it was slow.
Not only it was slow, it was also different in the implementation because we had a single SQL query generated for each DAX query, but we had so many limitations in the DAX code that you can use, in the DAX functions that you can use. I think you weren't allowed to use time intelligence functions.
Or calculated columns too.
Yeah.
We were not there. Anyway, the thing is, it was not useful. So we decided when we recorded the first edition of Optimizing DAX to skip direct query. Therefore, a large part of what is available right now, that is direct query, composite model, was not there. And that is enough, in my opinion, to create a complete new edition. Besides, we learned a lot more. So there were several details we were not sure about. We didn't know. We learned about.
I will add that also the tools changed. We didn't have, for example, Performance Analyzer in Power BI Desktop was not there. We had DAX Studio at that time, but the evolution of DAX Studio has been amazing, because actually we created new features in DAX Studio just for the training, because we realized that in order to analyze the query plan and getting a few information from the server timings, we needed new features, so we implemented them.
Who should attend the Optimizing DAX video course?
That's another interesting question. Well, I would say anybody who knows DAX. You need to know DAX. You need to know DAX really well in order to understand the code and be able to author the same query in different ways. But anyone who is serious about DAX should learn at least the basics of optimization, because I always think that the process of optimizing DAX starts when you write DAX, when you think about the model. That is the moment where you think about how to create efficient DAX code. So the more you know about optimization, the better DAX code you will write.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that one important element is that you must also know DAX well so that you are able to write the same measure in different ways. So it's not enough to barely being able to write the formula just in the first way that you can. You should be able to transform, to change the algorithm so that you can obtain a different query plan. Because we don't have magic hints to put in the query. We just have to rewrite the code in a different way so that we get a different query plan.
I remember a long discussion we had at the beginning of a chapter. I was explaining some code, and Marco sent it back with a comment, hey, but what if our users do not understand the context transition well? And I said, well, if they don't, they need to study it. They need to take mastering DAX first. They need to know the details because optimizing goes further. But anybody who is interested in DAX, in my opinion, should be interested in that training, even though it's a long journey.
This is a very long training. There are tens of hours of lectures. Was it really necessary?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We have there is a lot of content because there are a lot of information we had to provide, because the goal is to understand what is happening and not just to learn a few patterns of optimization of a few particular syntaxes that you have to learn. That's not the point. What is good today could be not good tomorrow if there is a evolution of the engine. But the thing is that we actually have three pillars of this training, which is the vertipack engine. So when you create a model and you import data in memory, we have direct query, we have composite model, and each of these different storage engines introduces new elements you have to consider for the optimization. So in general, there could be rules that could be good regardless of the storage engine, But actually, every storage engine might favor a particular approach toward another. So this is something that is important.
Yeah, actually, the choice of the storage engine is important. So there are some fundamentals which are good for any storage engine, but surely you can write code that works perfectly in vertipack and it will fall short as soon as you start using composite models or direct queries. So technologies are different, and there is the need for a lot of examples, a lot of demos, a lot of explanations.
And that's the reason why it's so long. I mean, it's just a large product. We have a lot of features in this product, the 3 different engines, and this means that we have to teach a lot of things. Yes.
And then we also speak slowly. So
but you can go faster in the video. Yeah, you can go.
no, they can't.
Yeah, okay.
So there are many new technologies like direct query and composite models that were not included in the first edition. Why did you decide to include them now?
As we said before, because now the product evolved in adding new features. So we already mentioned, I think, direct query at the beginning. Direct query was simply not mature enough at the beginning or when we recorded the first edition. Now is an option that you can use. It's not as fast as the import mode, but there are scenarios where direct query makes sense. So you will never be able to reach the optimization you can have for the imported model. But in case you have to use direct query, there are definitely optimizations you can do, including aggregation using the vertipack engine.
And then composite models. Composite models are a brand new technology. They should be in GA right now, so it's available, but it's a new technology that needs to be well understood. I think a lot of people will use composite models, unfortunately, the wrong way, without understanding the limitations in terms of performance. So these technologies need to be well understood, and that's the reason why we decided to add them to the Optimizing DAX. Besides, we no longer have limits about time. We decided up front not to have an upper limit for the time. So we know that the training is finished when it's finished. And if we need more hours, we will just add more hours. We don't want to follow the trend that a training needs to be just short and sweet and straight to the point. Repetitions help, seeing the same concept in multiple ways, also seeing the different ways of explaining topics that we have, because most of the topics are described by one or the other. Sometimes we exchange more often, but it's pretty normal that something will be said by him or by Marco or by me in a different way. So it's better understood, in my opinion.
And I think we also, I think you highlighted a good point. We might probably show the same optimization 2 or 3 times along the training from different point of views. So at the beginning, you just see the result. Then we see the optimization from a storage engine point of view, and then we see the same from a formula engine point of view, because 90% of the times we show an example where the optimization helps, and then another example where the optimization doesn't help and actually provides slower performances. Yeah. And so the thing is that you have to make decisions. It's not just a question of, oh, we have to write this instead of that. No, it depends. And you have to be able to understand when to choose A versus B. That's the entire point of the training, I think. Yeah.
It seems that there are 3 main modules: vertipack, direct query, and composite models, right?
Well, actually, no, there are 4, because these are the 3 storage engines: vertipack, direct query, and composite models. We call them the 3 storage engines, but they are actually orchestrated by the formula engine. The formula engine is the most powerful engine in the entire tabular architecture, and it's responsible of directing the queries to the different storage engines. So we cover first, after the introduction, the formula engine. We describe in detail everything about the formula engine. And we also start optimizing code already just at the formula engine level without worrying too much about what the storage engine will be. Once that is well described and understood, only then we can start understanding the details of the different storage engines. So actually there are 4 different main modules in the training.
And I would say that especially for a small model, when you have a performance issue with a model that has, I don't know, 5, 10 million rows, usually you don't have a storage engine issue, you have a formula engine issue. So probably the formula engine part is the more important, especially if you have a small model, even though you still have to understand how the storage engine works, because it's always the interaction between the two engines. You might have a slow report for a storage engine problem just because the query generated too many storage engine requests. You have to be able to identify that by looking at more details than just the division between storage engine and formula engine. Once you see that storage engine is 70%, maybe that the problem is that there are just too many storage engine queries, for example.
Yeah, besides sometimes, and I think it's our fault in some way, people think about the formula engine as the slow part of DAX. Oh, it's using the formula engine, so it's going to be slow. Actually, no. The formula engine is powerful. It's single-threaded. That's okay, but it is powerful. So understanding how to use it, it's important. And we also show optimization where pushing the code to the formula engine instead of the storage engine actually helps a lot. So it's important to learn the 4 pillars and how they work together, how they pass data between each other, and only then you are able to make educated choices about your code.
If I am interested only in direct query, can I skip the vertipack part?
No, if you want to understand how to optimize direct query, actually you have to first understand the formula engine, then understand the storage engine, the vertipack storage engine, for 2 reasons. One, the interaction between the formula engine and the storage engine, even though it is direct query, is always the same. And so I would say 80% of the information you have to gather from the vertipack module is about the interaction between the formula engine and the storage engine. The principle is the same once you go to direct query. And of course, once you go to direct query, you understand that you have at the same time a more powerful language in the storage engine, because actually SQL, the SQL code generated for direct query, has many more instructions than those available for vertipack. So this is an advantage. But at the same time, you also have a slower transfer rate between the 2 engines. So whenever you have to move data from the external data source to the formula engine, that operation involves the I/O with some other service, maybe on some other machine, and we have orders of magnitude of difference just in transferring data, not mentioning the limitation of the amount of data that you can transfer in a direct query storage engine operation. So what I'm trying to say is that once you know everything about formula engine and the storage engine, the vertipack storage engine, at that point you can start considering also the additional elements introduced by the direct query engine.
Yeah, I think you can skip the direct query part if you're not interested, but you cannot skip the vertipack part. Right. And besides, vertipack is important for composite model too. So at least you need to read that the formula engine, the entire vertipack section, and then if you are totally not interested in direct query, you can skip it, even though I think the more you know, the better. You know the technology, that helps you in choosing the right technology when you need it.
I understand, thanks. How did you organize the content?
We try to be very practical, meaning that the amount of theory that needs to be covered is massive. There are a lot of details, a lot of tiny details which are very easy to miss. So if we were to explain all the theory first and then maybe add exercises or demos to explain the content, that would be utterly boring. Nobody would ever be able to listen to all that theory. And I think they would also miss the practical aspect, the practical effect of some of the details. So we try to be very practical. We show some theory and then immediately after a demo that explains the theory and shows the effect of what we are explaining. And that is through the entire training. The drawback of this is that there is not a clear separation about concepts. We need to talk about vertipack long before we actually introduce vertipack. We need to look at XMSQL queries when we still have not introduced XMSQL. And the content is some way interleaved over the entire training.
Yeah, but I think that you have to follow the sequence we provide. So the idea is that we understand that sometimes we have to introduce a topic before it is really possible to understand all the details, but we did this intentionally because the alternative would have been provide a lot of theory in advance and then start with the demos. And that would have been extremely difficult to follow. So this way, we chose a strategy that allow the student to watch a lesson, watch a lecture, and then reproduce exactly the same demos, first with the same examples we used, and then on their own data models, for example, so that they can start to see the practical result on their model from the very, very first lessons, actually.
And also there's the benefit, in my opinion, that people will improve in a smoother way. Because you don't have to learn a lot of theory and then look at a lot of demos before you start improving your code. We show simple techniques at the beginning, but those simple techniques, they actually go much farther than you may think.
And I think that this is a difference. I mean, the first edition, we described the difference at the beginning in terms of content, but actually also the strategy in the content delivery is very different because now we have a more interactive approach, an approach that is from the beginning allow you to play with DAX Studio, with your model, analyze the measure, and get something. At the beginning, not everything. At the beginning, just a fraction of the information, but moving forward, you get always more and more until you probably understand everything.
Yeah, I think, in a few words, in the first edition, we were using slides. So there were always a PowerPoint slide, and we were explaining theory, and then at the end, some demos. This training is basically a gigantic demo. We demo everything, we show everything, we explain concept, and we immediately look at the results. There is some usage of the whiteboard. Sometimes we show pictures or slides, but everything is much, much more practical.
I've seen you also include a book with this training. Is that correct?
Just like Alberto said now, in the previous edition, the first edition, we actually had slides, bullet points that were part of the training. So the textual reference was the slide. What we did now is slightly different because in this training we have a lot of demos, a lot of code, and some explanation needed for the code. The best way to provide a companion content for the training was to just include the ebook version of the training where we have exactly the same content in the same sequence with the same organization, with the same demos, and actually this way you can have a written reference for whatever we say. So we know that there are different approaches in learning. Some person has a preference for the video lecture, other people have a preference for the written part, but actually depending on the moment you might want to review something in the other media. So the idea is that the student has the freedom of switching between one and the other, and the information is there.
And that counts as another book of ours.
Oh, yes. That's true.
So the students have the ebook and the lectures of the video course. How do they practice?
Well, we provide, in the companion content, we provide all the Power BI files that we are using with all the DAX code that we write step by step, exactly as it is in the book. So they will be able to just use Power BI Desktop to repeat every optimizations that we do the same reasoning and obtain the same numbers. From time to time, we need a larger database. And when that is the case, we no longer use a Power BI Desktop file, we use an analysis services database, which is just larger. That might be an issue for some students if they do not have access to analysis services, because they will not be able to get the same numbers. But the data model is the same. So we didn't create specific data models for specific demos. We always use Contoso. So they will be able to practice by repeating what we are doing, or, and that's a suggestion for following the training, they can just pause the video. Like, we ask a question, we start an optimization, and before we provide the solution, they can just pause the video, try to understand what kind of optimizations are possible, and then once they have a good understanding about the problem, and they tried, at least, to provide a solution, they can go farther with the video. And maybe they find a better solution than ours. That would be beautiful.
Absolutely, yes. And I would add that it's probably not easy to provide what is the best way to follow, because each person is different. But my suggestion would be, first, try the same demo, because first of all, you might have different numbers. Your machine is different. Alberto and I have different machines, and we had to provide, and we actually provided in all the demos, we provide in the comments of the DAX code, we included the CPU, RAM, and
the specs of the
machine where we made the test. Because this way, you look at the query, you see the result that we obtain in the demo, but then you can compare the hardware you used with the hardware we used. Especially when we do test with the storage engine with multiple cores involved, the numbers could be very different, even just because you have another application open, for example. So we obtain different results just because we had the recording active. So when we wrote the book, we had different numbers because during the recording of the demo, the numbers were different on the same machine. So that is something to consider. And then, of course, try to evaluate. So the idea of using always Contoso is because we wanted to focus on the problem, on the optimization, on the numbers, without concerns about different data models we had from time to time. Of course, when you start doing the analysis on your model, you have a different data model, different data types, different volume of data, and of course the numbers will be different, and that's the additional step. For this reason, we always suggest to start from day 0 to check what you can obtain from the lesson you learn when you look at your data model. So you start having different references, different numbers, and you can start to figure out how to interpret them also in different scenarios. That is, I think, the important thing to do.
With the speed at which technology advances, does it make sense to invest such a large amount of time for something that could change almost every month?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, because it is true. There is a new version of Power BI Desktop every month. So new optimizations and new details of the engine, new DAX functionalities, new ways of optimizing the DAX code. But the fundamentals of optimizing DAX are still the same since the very beginning. So how the vertipack engine stores data, how to compress data, how to reduce the time to scan columns. These are all details that remain constant since the very beginning. Then, of course, over time, the optimizer will be better, and maybe some of the demos that we run today will no longer be valid, and the optimizer will do a better job than we are doing. That is for sure possible, but that's the reason why we never focus on specific optimizations. We do not teach patterns, we do not teach best practices, we do not teach write this instead of that. We teach if you see this scenario, if the storage engine queries have this shape, if the time is divided between the formula engine and the storage engine in this way, then maybe there is the possibility of optimizing the DAX code. So we teach a way to find the bottlenecks, discover new ways of thinking about the problem, moving the calculation to the formula engine, to the storage engine, or changing the way you compute the values by writing different versions of the same code. If users learn that, so if that is the real takeaway of the training, what they learn will be valid for a very long time, because things will change, but you learn how to discover where your query is low and how to get better results.
Yeah, I think that if I can recap, you learn a methodology to analyze the problem and to evaluate solutions rather than looking at a few patterns that you can apply. In the short term, maybe that a few patterns we show could be valid, maybe for 6 months, 1 year. But maybe in 3 years, you might discover that, oh, now the demo that we played today is different. It doesn't work anymore the same way, but the principle behind that is the same. So maybe that particular structure that was not optimized 2 years before, then it is optimized, but then you discover that the bottleneck now is in another part, because of course you increase the data volume, you created more complex measures, and now you discover another problem that you will discover with the same technique, and we will solve with the same process of analysis that we explain in this training.
Great. Do you want to add something?
No, yes. Yes, I think the only thing that I would add is that we had a lot of fun. It's been a total pleasure to write the book, to prepare the training, to record everything. We loved every moment of this journey. Was just beautiful.
Besides when the demo didn't work.
We loved that too. I mean, it was just great, just because we solved it. And if we didn't, we are not showing the video, so nobody sees that. So our hope, I think, is that our students will enjoy this journey with us the same way we did, because that would be the best moment for us, if they really enjoy learning how to optimize DAX.
Yes.
I'm sure they will. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.